Following video is brought to you by Yellow Jacket. Yellow Jacket, try out the brand new digital manifolds, the P51-860 and P51-870. Now available at test equipment distributors across the country.
Refrigerants, yes, they're sexy and wonderful, and we're going to talk about them here tonight. We started the conversation yesterday on HST radio, but I could not continue it this morning because there was a kink in the plan. The kink in the plan was this. I have a very little baby. Last night, my wife was exhausted, so I told her, I said, go to bed. I'll sit up with Jackson Systems Toyota. That's his name. I was up with little Jackson Systems, and she went to bed, and I decided to wait a little bit longer just to give her a little bit more time to sleep. Because I know how hard it is to function when you don't have much sleep, because we've all done it before. We all know it's very difficult. So I sent her off to bed. She went to bed 11 o'clock, 11:30. I forget what it was. So I sat up with little Jackson Systems Toyota till around 2:30 in the morning. And then I was doing this number where you're sitting there and I'm holding the kid. It's like this over and over again. And I knew at that point I was pretty much maxed out as far as my stamina doing that sort of thing. And little Jackson Systems was about to wake up and want to eat anyway. And I'm no help with that. So I went to get her up then. But because of that, really threw a wrench into the works. Because around 6:30 the next morning, I wake up and take the kids to school. And of course, when I got up at 6:30, I was real fired up for the day, real fired up, ready to go right back to bed. But I couldn't do that just yet. So I took them to school. I came back to the house. I did a little bit of stuff here in the office. And I went back and I conked out big time. So normally I would like to do an HST radio show at around 9 a.m. But just did not work out this time because at 9 a.m. I was snoozing. I was snoozing for a couple more hours after that. Maybe 3, to be honest, maybe 3. So I was snoozing all morning. I didn't do an HST radio show. I don't know. Maybe I will, because that might be a common occurrence, because I try to help her as much as possible. I know it's very difficult. The baby relies on her. I'm not as critical. I'm critical because I'm the father of the baby, but he needs to get his sustenance from her. So it's really kind of difficult. So we might move the show to a lunchtime show, because I know a lot of guys listen at that time, around 12 to 1 p.m. I know in the West Coast, that's 10 a.m. and in the mountain time and therefore thereon. So we might do that. So we're going to try to do that perhaps. That's what we're going to try to do. Maybe. Stay tuned. But we're going to still do YouTube each night. We're a little bit earlier tonight. The reason is because I was requested to do it earlier by my lovely bride so we can hang out a little bit later. And I said, well, that's fine. That's cool. We might miss a few of the guys, and I'm sorry about that, but they're going to maybe catch the next one. So here we go. First and foremost, I saw today, I was on the Amp Pro website because I was making podcast commercials for the podcast that's coming out in the morning. Stay tuned for that. And I noticed at the Amp Pro website, they do have a recall. So you guys might want to know this or spread this around. The Amp Pro 400 series wire tracers are being recalled. So evidently there's a risk of shock. They plug into the wall there, and there's like a little connection. I'm not quite sure about it. I didn't bring it up. I probably can. Let me see if I can't bring that up on the Amp Pro website. We'll talk about it for just a second, because that's an important thing. You don't want to get zapped. We all do that. Here, I'll click on it and let's share the screen. And I'll show you guys what it says. Here we go. I'll present that to everybody. See here, important product safety recall notice. Please read immediately. The Amp Pro team is voluntarily recalling the AT4000 wire tracer series. Why is this recall happening? The T4000 and T4000-A transmitters included in the AT4000 series advanced wire tracer kits exhibit a condition that may lead to electric shock. There's a nice picture there with a big yellow triangle with an exclamation point saying that you could be shocked. So if you have those, that's the AT4000, and I guess T4000 and T4000-A, AT4000 series advanced wire tracer kits. Might want to check in at your distributor in case you need to return it for repair or a new wire tracer. So there you go. We don't want to get zapped. That'd be bad. So in case you have one of those, just take a look and do accordingly. Not a lot of us have those, but some of the electrical sparkies out there, like Hernandez, might have one. So what we're going to talk about today, we're talking about refrigerants. The reason why we're talking about this, because I started yesterday, we talked about 421A and 427A. If you missed that on the live event yesterday morning, don't worry. It's going to be part of the podcast tomorrow morning, so you'll be able to hear that. Let's talk about, 407C. We're going to talk about 422B, and also I think we're going to do MO99, because there was a real big argument on Facebook I noticed about how MO99 is horrible, 407C is good sometimes, some of them suck, and it looks like there's a lot of misinformation about these refrigerants. So we're going to take a look and see what are the components of these refrigerants and how do they operate, how do they return oil, and all that good stuff. So let's start with 407C. Actually, I'm gonna share the screen. We'll take a look at it. Here we are. We have 407C. This is from National Refrigerants. Thank you, National Refrigerants. And the ingredients are right here, along with the weight percentage. We have difluoromethane. And notice that these fluoromethanes, we have a lot of them that start like that, or correction, we have a lot of them that end like that have different prefixes based on how many molecules are in there, what kind of bonds they have. So we have difluoromethane, which is HFC 32. That's in a lot of different refrigerants. We're going to go over that too. I think I have the 410A sheet pulled up as well. And the percentage of that refrigerant in 407C is 23%. We go to pentafluoroethane, not methane, ethane. That's HFC 125. It's 25%. Remember, we discussed this, that R125 is there to prohibit the flammability that occurs with difluoromethane in this particular case, which is HFC 32. Since HFC 32 is mildly flammable, we need something there that will offset that. That's what the R125 does. So let's look at the next line. We have tetrafluoroethane, which is 134A. We all know that one. It's 52%. And think about it. If we take the first two lines there, let's highlight that. Difluoromethane and pentafluoroethane, that is the composition of 410A. I do believe that's a 50-50 composition. We'll look at that in a second. And then those are both higher pressure refrigerants. So if we just use those two, we'd have a very elevated pressure, 410A's pressure, in fact. In fact, if you see here, over here, 25 and 23, the composition is almost the same between those two, 23%, 5%. So it's very similar to 410A up until that point. When you get to the 134A, we're going to bring the pressures down and have that third component, but it's also going to increase our glide. Our refrigerant glide, the boiling points of these different refrigerants are far apart. So we're going to have that big temperature glide. We're not going to go into glide, but I've noticed some good stuff about glide out there. I was actually looking online at a post from HVAC School at their website. That's Brian. They have a thing about glide. They describe what glide is, how to calculate it. So if you want to learn how to calculate glide using bubble and dew points, you can go over there and check that out. We also talked about that with Matt McKinney, not on this last podcast, but on the previous podcast where we talk about R22 retrofits. So that's 407C. We have our three components, difluoromethane. There'll be a test on this at the end, guys. I'm just kidding. No one's going to remember this stuff. I think I'm going to start remembering it because I'm saying them so many times, but you don't have to remember all this stuff. So difluoromethane, HFC 32, pentafluoroethane, 125, and tetrafluoroethane, 134A. All right, let's go on to R422B. Since we had Matt McKinney on, that's their big deal over there at ICOR. It's R422B. Let's see how these are different. Okay, the first component is the same as the previous refrigerant. Pentafluoroethane is 125. But remember, and excuse me, remember that 125 was actually there to prohibit the flammability from R32, but there's no R32 in this particular one. There's a different component, but it's in a small percentage. Tetrafluoroethane, again, 134A. So we have two familiar ones right off the bat. The one we're missing out of 407C is R32. 422B doesn't have R32, which is a shame because R32 is actually a really good refrigerant. It's mildly flammable, but has great thermodynamic properties. Isobutane, or HC, and the reason why it says HC is because it's a hydrocarbon. So we go from something that's mildly flammable, like 32, to a hydrocarbon, which is extremely flammable. We're talking about your butanes, your propanes, very flammable. And you see here, the 3%, you can only have a certain percentage of these very flammable refrigerants, or it will cause the entire blend to become flammable. But in this case, we have the 125, and we have the small percentage of isobutane, which is HC 600A. That keeps that flammability down to a negligible level. It's a not flammable refrigerant. So far we've had 2 refrigerants that are both R22 replacements, 407c being my favorite one. Everybody knows my method. We won't go into that this time. We see the components on these 2. Let's go to another one. Now, this is DuPont Iceon MO99 refrigerant. Now we go down through here. I brought it up to the top because I wanted to remember which one we were talking about. All right, here's our components. Now let's remember R407c. And there's 2 pages of these. We can't see the bottom one here. We'll get to that in a minute. The first component is pentafluoroethane. Again, HFC 125. We start to see the patterns here, except it's different than 407c because the percentages of 2 of these are way higher. We see pentafluoroethane HFC 125, 45% composition. That is much higher than the 407c. Let's go back for a second. See, the 407c only has 25%. And we go to tetrafluoroethane, HFC 134a. It's all the way up to 44.2%, which is actually a little bit lower than the 407c. And then we go to difluoromethane, which is the really good refrigerant for thermodynamics. It's the HFC 32. There's only 8.5%, so there's less of that because we, again, go back and we can see that they have 23% of the weight in 407c. We come back, so there's less of that one, and there's the butane. All right, let's look at that. There's butane, and if we look down here on the next page, we have methyl butane, 0.6%, and butane is 1.7%. Now, why are these hydrocarbons in these refrigerants? The hydrocarbons are in MO99 and they're in 422B for oil return. These are so you can put it into mineral oil systems and have the oil return. Otherwise, you're going to have a compressor failure because with these HFC blends, the HFC refrigerants by themselves, now look at these. These 3 refrigerants, see if I can highlight these. These 3 refrigerants are the ones that are in 407c. Everybody knows that they've been told over and over again that you can't use these 3 refrigerants with mineral oil. You can't use R32 and 125 with mineral oil. That's 410a. So if you add 134a, another refrigerant needs POE, you're not going to be able to use it with mineral oil unless you add some to it. They've added a hydrocarbon. My personal experience, I put in a little bit of POE oil on top of the mineral oil charge. That's how I get around it with 407c. But with these refrigerants, they use a small percentage. In this case, it looks like 2.3% with the butane and methyl butane, and that is used to carry the oil. So there we have 3 different ones. Let's see what else we have here. Those are some pressure temperature differences. We won't do that just yet. Let's see. There's temperature glide. Here's 410a. All right, 410a. Now think about these refrigerants again. They don't have the names on here, but we should be able to remember. Difluoromethane and pentafluoroethane. Now the difluoromethane, that is R32. Again, same refrigerant that was in all these blends except for the 422B. Pentafluoroethane, that's our R125 to suppress the flammability of R32. It's got to be there. A lot of these units overseas are now using R32. There's a lot of talk about that being the issue behind these explosions. I think Ralph has said in the past, and I tend to agree with him without having solid proof found yet, that is not going to be what's behind these different explosions. That's not going to be the case here because it's a mildly flammable refrigerant. We've had him on the podcast before, Matt McKinney. We've talked to other guys about it. You'd have to hold a flame to this refrigerant to get it to burn. It's not going to keep burning once you remove the flame. It's very mildly flammable. It's not like propane where you light that candle and you have yourself a fireworks display. It's a little bit different than that. But as you can see, it's a 50-50 weight. The glide for 410A, that boiling difference, the pressure difference in the boiling points is so close, there's hardly any glide. That's why when you go to charge 410A now, they don't really freak out and say you have to withdraw the charge and replace it because the glide is almost nil. It's almost like a single component refrigerant. So you can just add refrigerant on top. Now, if you go to something like, let's see here, 407c, the glide is much different. Now, let's look at this form over here. This is from our buddy at Chemours, I believe. We have a few different refrigerants over here. Now, look at this. Freon 410a. They call everything Freon, guys, so it's okay to call everything Freon, I guess. And who cares? 410a is less than half a degree Fahrenheit of glide. Temperature glides are very small. Now look at 407c. 407c has a huge temperature glide. What does this mean? You might have some concerns if you lose a lot of charge. You might actually have a lot of concerns because you would then be changing the mixture of the refrigerant depending on where it's leaking from. And there was some discussion about this as well. If you're leaking from the liquid line, you're in a liquid state, which is true, which means it's going to leak out in the same components at the same percentage. That makes sense if it's in a liquid state, a compressed liquid state. But think about when the system's offline. You go to the saturation points. And once you're at the saturation points, you might have some uneven leaking. You might have an issue where it's going to change composition if it's left undiagnosed for a long period of time. So if you have a 407c leak and it's maybe a pound low, I tend to think you could probably reach that. But if you get to the 30 or 40% low markers, I think you're better off taking it all out. And that's one of the big drawbacks to replacement refrigerants for R22, because you're going to get into a position, where the composition is going to change, especially with guys dumping it on top of other stuff. Then you don't know what you're doing. It doesn't matter anymore. So that's a little bit about glide. You can see some of these other ones. I'm not as familiar with these, but you see there's a large glide there with MP39. Not as much with 404A. It's a lot like 410A. But when you get to the 407Cs and your MO99s, I don't think I brought up the MO99 spec sheet, but you're going to have that same thing. Now I'm going to look at the chat real quick, see if we have any questions. And we're going to get to some of this other stuff in a second. So I'm going to take a break here. Let's look at the chat. I haven't looked at it in a while. The gears are here. Where is Matt McKinney when you need him? Matt McKinney's going to do one of these things. He already agreed. 438 is your favorite, Albert. 438's MO99. And I tend to think that MO99 is just fine. I used it before. There's a lot of guys going, man, you can't use this. This is crap. I saw it on Facebook. This is all junk. It's actually not junk. I think you just need to read about what you need to use it on. If you have a huge commercial system or a huge long line set with a lot of drop, you might want to think twice about using some of these replacements and just go with R22. You might be better off just doing that. Oh, look, it's a great channel name. Good grief. I use them all. That's Alexander Figueroa says. I'm glad you're learning a lot, Jeff. This is actually something I actually know about. I don't know about much, guys, but I know about this. Any other questions before we get back to some of this other stuff? Near azeotropic. That's right. Near azeotropic. That's what it is. Some of these blends are so close. They have such a small glide that you could just recharge them as if it were one refrigerant like R22. Let's see what else we have. Let me share some screens here. We'll get back after it, guys. If you have any questions, you can hold them to the end. We'll go for about, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 more minutes. I don't know what time it is. 8:19. Yeah, we'll go to around 8:30 or 8:40. If you have any questions. Let me share my screen. All right. I have this here, and I'll actually put this in the chat real quick before I get back to it. This is from Sporlin. And what this is, system considerations for refrigerant blends with temperature glide. Something that you guys can take a look at. I'll put it in the chat. Want to go ahead and copy it and download it or what? Copy. Paste. There we are. So you guys can check that out. It's pretty good information right there. All right. That's all I wanted to do for that. I'm actually X out of that. See what else we have here. 410A we already talked about. Now let's look at some of these PT charts real quick. We have a call, but we're not taking calls right now. All right, let's look at some of these PT charts real quick. Now we have R22, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit if I can. You see R22 right there. We're going to go to the Fahrenheit setting. Let's go to 32 degrees. We're over here, right here, if you guys can see us. 32 degrees. And you can see right here that the pressure that corresponds with 32 degrees is 57.5. We're only doing this so you can see the differences between some of the other drop-in refrigerants. Because if you go out to a drop-in and you're charging it up, you don't have like a Testo manifold, a new Yellow Jacket manifold, like at the front of this video we were advertising. If you don't have something that's going to calculate your superheat subcooling, you're going to have to do it by hand. And if you're using retrofits and you're not being responsible and you're not actually calculating superheat and subcooling, you're just filling it into a certain percentage or a certain pressure, you're going to have a big issue because the pressures, they run differently. So let's look here at R22, and I'm going to go ahead and show you guys again. At the top, you see 22 and 407c right there. So that's going to be really easy to look at. Let me actually move this over so it's more in the middle. All right, at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 57.5, and 4 is 52.1. 52.1. So that's a difference of 5.4 psi. Now you say that's not too big of a difference, but it is a difference. So if we go up to where you're charging to 70 psi and you try to charge 407c up to 70 psi, what possible problems are you going to have? You possibly could have flood back, 0 degrees of superheat going right into the compressor. If you have a TXV, you might end up with excessive head pressure because it's going to back off of that TXV in order to get the superheat back up. You're going to end up having a compressor that runs a higher amperage. And why does that happen? Okay, you have a TXV, you have oil that has air of a certain temperature moving across it, a certain dry bulb return temperature. All right, a TXV wants to constant superheat. So if you start flooding more refrigerant into that machine than what it's designed for, or what the charge calls for, the TXV is going to dial back the flow. It's not going to let you flood that evaporator coil within measure. There's certain parameters a TXV can work under. So within those parameters, it's going to back off, let less refrigerant through there so that superheat comes back up. Maybe it's 5 degrees, maybe it's 10 degrees. I've seen them anywhere between like 5 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit superheat. Just in that range, right there at the evaporator. So it backs off. Where does it have to send that refrigerant? Where does the refrigerant go that was meant to be in the coil that you've added to this machine to get it to 70 psi? And you might not be able to get it to 70 psi because the TXV might be keeping it that low because of your air temperature, unless you just grossly overcharge it. So now you have a TXV that's basically clamping down, not allowing that refrigerant through there because it wants that certain of subcooling. You're going to see that refrigerant turning from gas to liquid in the condenser at a very early point in the condenser because it's going to build up pressure. It's going to build up refrigerant right there. You're going to run a higher head pressure. You're going to work the compressor harder, and you're going to actually have higher amperage on that compressor. So you'll notice it might be near its RLA, or it might be, instead of 70% of the RLA, it might be 90% of the RLA, where you're going to have a less efficient system because you overloaded it with refrigerant. And keep it in mind, you're already using a substitute refrigerant for R22. So not only will you have an issue with just less efficiency, because you already have less efficiency because you're using something that's not R22, you're going to take more efficiency away from the system. And the homeowner may or may not know, because a lot of these things that are being retrofitted are on buildings where they can't afford to do anything but like replace the system. But you have to be aware that you're going to cause more issues than you might. Well, you're going to cause a lot of issues because you might actually end up destroying the compressor and defeating the purpose of saving the money. So let's look at some more information here. This is the MO99 pressure temperature chart, and it has bubble point and dew point. And the reason why it has those two is because it has a big temperature glide. If you have R22, you have single saturation point. But this has two because you have the dew point and the bubble point. Saturated vapor, saturated liquid. You can see it right here. Saturated vapor, dew point, saturated liquid, bubble point. So let's see what we have. We have the saturated temperature right here. Let's go to 32. If we go to 32 right here, actually, am I not looking? I'm looking for 32 over there on this side, right here. At 32, the pressure is 50 psi. Now remember, we were 5 psi off, and now we're about 7 psi off for MO99. So if you take MO99 and you charge it up to 70 psi, you're going to be even more in the wrong than you were with 407c. And keeping in mind, these refrigerants work. I've used MO99. I liked it. I liked it a lot. I thought it worked very well. It's been in operation as far as jobs that I've done, I want to say for 4 or 5 years. No issues there. No issues that I've heard about. Let me be honest. There's no issues that I've heard about. So it's a good refrigerant. 422B, I will tell you, I've never used 422B, but a lot of guys swear by it. I don't think you're going to have one that's going to outshine the others by a tremendous amount. But I think if you follow the rules, they'll all work out for you. Just keeping in mind, there's extreme situations where you shouldn't use these. If you're doing a job and you have a 150-foot line set or another long line set application, maybe you ought to go back with 22. To spend the extra money and go back with 22. It may cost a lot more, but your compressor may thank you in the morning. But I've used 422D before. Wasn't as much of a fan as that. And we talked about that with Matt McKinney, how 422D is like this bridge refrigerant between high and low temperature. The high temperature blend for the 422 series is more along the B line, 422B. 422D is more like a compromised version of 422B. Keep it in mind, if you have 422 A, B, C, D, all of those, it's just different mixture of the same composition. You have the same components, different percentages. That's all that means. MO99 is 438A. Like I said, I like that one. I think it's good. I think it's just fine. See what else we have here, guys. That might be about all we had. 407C. We have our recall there. 410A. Now, if you guys have any questions, I'll go ahead and answer those now. I'm going to stop, share the screen. Okay, guys, let's see. Do you have anything out there you want to say? Let's see. Let's see. Having trouble with the sound dropping out. I'm not sure if that's an actual issue for everybody or just your personal phone. If there's an issue with sound dropping out, guys, put it up there. Also got to go with amps. That's right. If your amperage is really high, it might be because you've overcharged this machine. If you don't use your PT charge or use gauges that have these refrigerants built into them, you're going to have an issue. Yes, Canon is the one that called. Which way does a stub on the TXV volt point when you install a TXV? It doesn't matter. That's straight from Sporlin on one of our podcasts. And let's see. 422D sucks. Good for medium temp refrigeration. You know, that's what he was talking about. It's more made, and you look at the composition, and next time maybe I'll bring that up. Maybe we'll have 422D versus B and show you 422A, B, C, and D to show you the differences between them. The applications are different because depending on how you mix the refrigerants, you're going to have like a medium temperature, like 427C versus 427A, not 427, 407C versus 407A or F. You might use A or F for lower temperature refrigeration, but C you would use for either medium or high temperature. Everybody's sound is good. Okay, so it might be just the one. All right, cool. Some guy on Facebook was asking about a good drop-in for 410A. There's guys out there working on replacing 410A. I know about this stuff. I've talked to some of the guys. As soon as they're clear to come on the podcast and talk about it, we have gentlemen that are lined up to talk about what's going to replace 410A and what companies out there are actually working on to replace 410A with. RS44 is good for refrigeration as well. I've never used RS44 or RS44B. I can't remember the two names. I think it's 424A and 453A. I've never used either one of them. I think Ralph's used RS44B. He liked it. Used 407C. It was zip tied because the bulb lost partial charge and was hunting to a low superheat, hanging in the air to help get a better superheat. Trying to get a warmer sense there. So I understand that. A lot of guys will cut those off and they'll put nitrogen in them to hold them over for like a night or two. Ralph said he liked RS44B. Guys, I'm going to give it about 5 more minutes. Have any other questions? Any questions on anything? You have any ideas for topics? I'm going to try to bring some people in here with me and actually conduct the interviews on air. We'll do that during the week as well. This is the 3rd straight day. I missed this morning, though. I want to kick myself. I missed this morning, but it couldn't be helped. It might not be helped tonight either. If I have to, pull a late nighter tonight and compensate by laying down in the morning, try to come up with a schedule for the radio station where we can do like a midday broadcast. Maybe we'll go over how hot it is everywhere. Guys can call in on their lunch hour, stuff like that. Could be fun. Let's see. How to turn on a meter. That's pretty easy. Shop Talk shirts. Where can I order? I can put that down here in the chat, guys. The Nightbot. I don't know if Nightbot's out tonight or not. Let's see. I haven't seen Nightbot. Where's he at? There he is. Okay. I'll give you the link there. What is the schedule for the podcast? The actual audio release of the podcast doesn't have a fixed schedule. Usually one comes out every 2 or 3 days. There'll be one coming out in the morning, and we're going to actually talk about 421A, 427A on that podcast. Let me find your Teespring link, and I'll put it in there. Just give me a second, guys. I'm going to get it from another screen. All right. There's a storefront on Teespring that has stickers and shirts. I'd be happy for you to go buy some. That would be great. That would be wonderful. There they are. You can go in there and buy shirts or stickers. It's not like this shirt right here. It's a little bit different, but it's nice. I feel like Justin Hernandez and the John Took the Money avatar are asking me the same questions. Tips on turning on a meter. You guys shouldn't be so passive aggressive. Just go over to the video and give them tips yourself. How to change air filters. That's hard to do though. Are there any entry level questions? Oh, I see. How to change air filters. Uh, don't touch the shiny parts. If you had a church that wanted multi-zone mini splits and they wanted to run them only for a few hours on Sundays, would you size them to get the temps down quicker? They wanted multi-zone mini splits and they wanted to run them only for a few hours on Sundays. Now, is there already a system in the sanctuary of this church and this is just like a supplement? Because I've seen them use mini splits at churches and they'll turn them on just for short-term cooling, which I can understand that. And that's exactly what happens. They just cool for a few hours and turn them off for the rest of the week and let the master system cool it most of the time. We actually added a few systems like that. That was one of those Fujitsus that I raved about their customer support because we called them and they knew exactly what was wrong before we even got done talking. Yeah, they do it all the time, man. A rouster. LLFD, where does the arrow go? Liquid line filter dryer, the arrow goes. You just got to put it to the magnetic north. It's for classrooms. Okay, well, that'd be a little bit different. So is there another system that's in, not the sanctuary? Well, that would depend on the system that's in there already. I mean, you could use some sort of inverter system. And like I said, there's Ralph in the chat. I mean, reach out to Ralph. He could coach you on which machines would be the best ones to buy as long as they're Mitsubishi. He could tell you which ones to use and what kind of applications you could use them in. He could tell you that better than I could. I can tell you a general sense of how the load calculations work. And if you're remove humidity, if you're going to remove humidity, if I could speak, if you want to remove humidity during the week, you're going to have a smaller system, but you might have to add that extra boost to get the sensible temperature down on Sunday. Toward the evaporator, LOL. Yes, liquid line filter dryers will point toward the evaporator. You got to be careful, man, because you could have a system here that lines that runs like this, this, and this. The evaporator's up here, and they could turn it like this, thinking it pointing that way. It points with the flow toward the evaporator. There is an old R22 system, but it's going to cost a ton to fix it. I think we'd have to probably talk about that one a little bit. And use the Bosch. I would love to know who the John Took the Money guy is. That would be funny to know. It always cracks me up when we see avatars appear out of nowhere. I would click on it, but I bet there'll be no answers there. VRF could be an option. Some variable capacity machine. I guess you can't use a Bosch because it's not variable capacity. Only 4 rooms. All right, guys, I'm giving it a couple more minutes and we're going to take off for the night. I hope you enjoyed the refrigerant talk. I had a lot of fun. We'll talk some more about it. I think we talked about MO99, R410a, R422b, R407c. If you have any other refrigerants you want to talk about and investigate, why don't you shoot me a text on my phone here? That is 910-970-0774. I am going to type that into the chat. Text me if you want to talk about different refrigerant. I'll look into it. If it's one I haven't seen, that'd be great because I'd like to learn about it. We'll look about what the components are in it and how it would behave in an application. Joff says common YOB terminal all shorted. Then when I unhook the reversing valve, all the shorts go away. Defrost board. YOB all shorted when the board is. I mean, it could be all those terminals terminate on the defrost board. So I guess it could be. I guess you'd have to investigate that with the old meter. Bosch is a fancy single stage unit. That's what I hear from Joe. That's true. All right, guys. I think we're pretty much done for tonight. I don't see any other questions coming through here. If you do have a question, you can use that phone number right there in the chat, or you can email me at hvacshoptalk@gmail.com. Look for me again tomorrow night. I'll try to grab some guests on some of these things. I haven't really lined any up for this sort of stuff. I want to see how it was going to do. Looks like you guys are enjoying it. I'm enjoying it too. A little bit more of you came when we were a little bit later out there, but had to be a little bit earlier tonight. So, guys, stay safe out there. I'll try to see you tomorrow afternoon, right after lunch on HST Radio. If you have any questions about that, you can do the same thing. You can call me, or you can text me, or you can email me. Either way. But until then, guys, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next one.